Welcome to another episode of Mind Your Soul. And today we're going to talk about spirituality. And we have Nick Livek with us today, who's a spiritual life coach. Introduce yourself, please, Nick.
Hi, everyone. So my name is Nick, and as Farah was saying, I am a spiritual life coach. And yeah, this is something I've wanted to do for a long time. I love coaching. I love helping people really get from where they are right now to where they want to be, type of thing, right? So yeah, looking forward to talking more with you here, Farah.
Yeah, and Nick, you have your own podcast as well. I didn't say that in introduction. It was very it was very short. It's called Mindful Perspective. And how come you have the podcast and you're doing coaching? How are they related? And yeah, so what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, that's a very great question, Farah. So for me personally, I started the coaching and the podcast for a simple reason. It's to really help people really from help them go from again it's where they are right now to where they want to be, and the reason I did that specifically is because I went through my own dark night of the soul, if you will, right? So a few years ago, and I talk about this in my story on my podcast, and I've talked about this even on my Instagram profile as well. But essentially, I've been through my own dark time, right? And so I know what it is, I know what it feels like, and I know how it can be very hard to kind of walk that path. So for me, I started coaching, and this is really my why, is to help people really that are stuck in those paths, if you will, right? So people who are feeling lost or really kind of stuck in their head, and their mind is taking over, right? Or they're not able to sit with themselves and process their emotions and really get a better understanding of themselves overall, right? I really think that self-awareness is a superpower, right? So with that being said, this is really why I started the podcast and the coaching, is to really help people who live through a similar experience as I did myself. Yeah.
I think many people can mirror themselves in just what you just said. I think we all have we all have things that we want to heal from, we want to grow, and so I love your Instagram profile. So I think I saw one of your posts or something that really talked to me, and then we connected, and yeah, I listened to some of your episodes, and they're really great. So you do them solo, but you talk about like important subjects as imposter syndrome. You talk about so many things, though. But I that one really spoke to me because I'm also coaching, and even though I'm coaching about limiting beliefs and all of this mental health stuff, I can myself feel imposter syndrome even though I'm doing it and I'm healed from so many things. But of course,
Mhm.
I'm just like the rest of the people that we coaching. We have the same things we go through, right? So I feel like your podcast is very good, a good eye opener, and yeah, I just wanted to share that. um so thanks for doing an awesome job. And that's why you're on the podcast today, because I wanted to talk about spirituality. No, because there are so many life coaches out there. There are many people, well, with so many different names to it. I think we all basically trying to help people, what we have in common. No matter if you're a neuroscientist or whatever, we're just trying to help people to become a better version of themselves. And
Mhm.
but the spiritual thing kind of caught my eye because I talk about spirituality on my page, and I was interested in us having a conversation about it today. Um, so, how would you define spirituality, and how is it? Yeah. So, first of all, we could define spirituality, what it means, and then we could
Mhm.
talk about how you can incorporate that into coaching and into having that in your life. Yeah.
I love that. Thank you, Farah. And first and foremost, thank you again, like I said, for acknowledging the podcast and everything. I do appreciate that. And I think that's a very good question that you're bringing up about spirituality. So the first thing, even before I give my own perspective and definition, I want to clarify something. So I think the word spirituality is a word kind of like, for example, success or purpose, right? So it can mean different things to different people. So that's just what I want to share first and foremost. So my personal perspective on spirituality, there are kind of two topics, if you will, right? Two subjects. So the first one, spirituality. So what does it mean to me specifically? So for me specifically, and the way I work with people as well, is spirituality is about your inner world, right? It's the inner journey. It's about going inwards and getting a better understanding of yourself. So not only, for example, what triggers you and all that, of course, that's an essential part, but also getting a better understanding of yourself as a whole. So, for example, what do you love? What are your passions? What are your core beliefs? What are your core values, right? All these different things. And that's one aspect. And then, of course, it's really getting to know yourself from the other perspective, right? So seeing really what's kind of in your shadow, if you will, right? So the term shadow here. And what I mean by that is, for example, all the things that are suppressed, right? All the things that trigger you, all these different types of things, right? So I find the first and foremost aspect of spirituality is really it's that journey inward, right? It's about, can you allow yourself to feel what needs to be felt? Can you allow yourself to heal what needs to be healed, right? And I think that this is a very important topic, and it's something that obviously there are tools and techniques that you can work on your own. But one thing, I want to bring this up, and I talk about this a lot in my episodes as well, is like it's very important that this work can be done with a therapist, a coach, or any of these things, right? And I really want to highlight that because I find it so important. Like I have my own therapist, you know what I mean? Like as a coach myself, I want
I
to
have
be
my own coach.
good,
Yeah,
exactly, right. And I think that that's perfect. And I think as coaches, that's something we should all have our own coach, our own therapist, whatever it may be,
definitely.
right? Right. So someone to really help us guide us on our own path, right? Because I
100%.
think
It's like a boomerang. Like we do it, but we need it too, right? We just like them. We want to grow ourselves as well. So yeah,
100%,
absolutely.
absolutely,
Yeah.
right? I fully agree with that. So for me, and that's what I mean when I'm sharing that as well. And I talk about that on my podcast a lot because I think that mental health is so important. And what I'm trying to say here to just kind of summarize this is that, asking for help is a sign of strength, not of weakness, right? So if you're struggling with something, this is
100%.
why it's so important to do that. So again, I think that's really the first aspect is really understanding yourself from a broader level, right? So what you love and
Hmm.
also the things that trigger you and such. And the reason why I find it so important to do the inner work also is obviously, well, for yourself, right, to get that peace of mind and to gain clarity and understanding of yourself, to develop that self awareness, but also the work you do on yourself creates a ripple effect, right? It really does, right? Like I've seen this personally in my own life. When you work on yourself,
100%.
you're impacting other people that you might not even be aware of, right? So, as an example, like, a lot of people know that I love reading, and I love books, and I talk about books all the time. And what I've noticed is that people around me now are starting to read a lot more, like my close friends, my
That's
brother,
amazing.
right? So he got into reading, like he's reading a lot of books now, and this was just a byproduct of me talking about it, and they saw how it changed my life, right? Like I say all the time,
100%. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
right? So that's really
Yeah.
the first aspect I would talk about spirituality. So what that means to me. The second portion as well, I would say that really kind of encompasses this as well is also in my personal opinion, I think that we are part of a greater whole, right? I think there's something beyond us, something greater than ourselves, if you will. And I think that's really a good energy to tap in. Now, this is also what I want to clarify as well. Whether that for you is God, the universe, whatever, I don't care what you call it, right? Like what I'm trying to say is, to me, spirituality is not about religion. And again, I have nothing about
It's
like
not
I
to
have
me
nothing
either.
against,
It's not about
right?
religion, no.
Right. So
Mm.
and I have nothing against religion or anything like that. What I mean by
Mm-hmm.
that is, to me, spirituality is um, something that we all have as humans. It's something that we all inherit, whatever philosophy you follow. Like even if you follow like or are more aligned with Hinduism, Buddhism, Stoicism, whatever philosophy or branch you dive into, I just believe that spirituality is not just tied to religion. And the reason I bring this up is because I've talked to many people who really associate spirituality and religion as the same thing, and they're really not. So what I'm saying is that
Mm.
you know everyone is, in my personal opinion, spiritual in that sense, right? So that would really be how I kind of bridge those two aspects together, and that would be my entire definition of what spirituality means to me. And this is what I bring in my coaching as well. Is really it's about doing the inner work. It's about getting to know yourself better. It's about really connecting with yourself and something greater, right? So that to me is personally what that means.
It is, but it requires then you can tap into yourself, and not many people can do that. I mean, it
Mhm.
takes time. I was not able to do that. So you have to like there's ways to get there, and I'm more spiritual now than I was like 6 years ago because I've been working with myself and tapping more into myself. So I would say once you are able to do that, if you also meditate or you can sit in silence and yeah, read books and do stuff like that. You could be in nature, just looking at nature, stuff like that. When you're tapping into yourself, when you're at peace with yourself, then I feel like you're on your spiritual journey. That's where it kind of
Absolutely.
begins. Yeah, because when you have all the noise and you don't know how to, and you're always drugging yourself with, I don't know, social media, or always doing something, or being too socializing. Well, you're being too, you know what I mean? You can be alone with your thoughts and yourself, then you're not in touch with your spirituality, I would say. It kind
I
of
fully
takes,
agree.
yeah. So, but yeah, it's not religious, and many people do have a tendency, maybe it's a norm or something, that they kind of attach those two together, link them together, like, oh, so you're Muslim, so it's something to do with that. No, not really.
Hmm.
It doesn't
Absolutely.
like. right? Yeah. So
And
I think you
I
answered
would
that
have
beautifully about
thank you, Farah.
spirituality, because that is basically what it is.
Hmm. Absolutely. And I was going to ask you, if you don't mind, like, does that perspective align with you as well? Like, what is your take on spirituality, Farah? Like, if you would love to share your perspective as
Yeah,
well.
I did share something. So for me, I've gotten more spiritual for the last 2 years because I
Hmm.
started doing meditation more. I always been praying and meditating, but I now I can actually tap into myself in silence without anyone speaking in my ears. I do listen to the voice meditation as well, but now I can actually just be on my balcony around something green and just tuning into myself with my eyes closed and
Hmm.
visualizing something for myself when I'm having a hard time. And it's just like to see birds around me, and like I think we talked about this a while ago, that I have so my bird is a white bird. And every time, so I think that's a sign from the universe. So that's my bird. So every time I have a hard time, when I see that bird, I'm like, okay, the universe got me. Like, I'm good. No matter what happens, like, I will always
Hmm.
be good because there is a higher calling, and I'm very much connected to the universe. So I feel like I'm always on the right path, but I have been not always feeling like that, like feeling chaos around me and couldn't cope with it. But now I know I can tap into myself and I see signs, and that's like spirituality to me. So I
I
feel
love
like
that.
I've gotten more spiritual over the years, practicing mindfulness more and more. So I feel like if you do those things, you definitely get there. You have to start
Mhm.
somewhere, right? Um, Start with the small things, like just sitting with yourself without no phone, no distraction, just alone with yourself, and just looking at nature. It actually, so what happens is that it kind of your nervous system kind of calms down, and when you're just looking at nature or just looking at house plants, you're feeling less stressed out because just the green itself calms you down. So if you can spend like 20 minutes in nature every day, which I highly recommend, if you can do so, that will be very good for your mental health. It would boost your dopamine levels, even though you're not exercising or you're not doing anything, but just being around something green actually calms you down.
Hmm.
It's very good for your mental health. Yeah.
I love that.
So that's my take on spirituality. So tell me, Nick, how do you kind of relate spirituality then into your coaching business? Like when you coach people and they're not spiritual, let's say they've never meditated or they haven't been alone with their thoughts. Like, so how do you kind of combine those things? Like, do your clients have to be kind of on that path, or is it okay if they're not and they might get become spiritual? Or yeah, so how do you kind of incorporate that into your coaching?
That's a great question. So, and honestly, I think it depends on the individual themselves, right? But
Yeah.
typically, the people that I do work with typically are a little bit more quote unquote spiritually inclined, right? Because again, they know kind of what I bring to the table, and obviously with the term spiritual life coach, obviously I think they have a more a tendency to be attracted more towards that, right?
Yes.
Like I said, since I've shared my story, like I made a video on Facebook explaining everything, and I think people align themselves with that, right? So and so to me personally, like the people I've worked with, it really depends where they're on their path. But I would say that I've worked with people that like they want more clarity on essentially what spirituality is or these types of topics. Because again, like I said, right, earlier, is spirituality can mean different things to different people, right? But like again, typically the people I've worked with are always very open-minded to the topic, and they're already like always open-minded to talking about these different spiritual practices, right? But again, like for example, it depends on the person, right? If I'm working on someone and they're not, or they want to learn meditation, then I can we can work on that. We can talk about meditation, all these
Of
different things.
course.
But I'm working with people that don't have an interest in
Hmm.
meditation, right? So for me, it's really about, okay, where are you right now? And where do you want to go, right? And then depending
That's
on what your
basically what
problem
coaching is about. Yeah.
exactly, right? So it's honestly, I think the most important part of coaching is the art of listening. If you can truly listen to your client, right, and listening with the intent to understand and not simply just reply, I think that's the goal in coaching, right? To really listen to someone and and hear what they have to say from their perspective, right? So for me, it like the first session I start with my clients is always, okay, like again, like I've said many times, where are you right now and where you want to be? What is your objective in this coaching, right? So,
This is also
and
how I do it, because we what
right.
coaching, so many people ask me what's the difference between therapy and coaching. I'm like, coaching is very much about the present right now, what you need,
Mhm,
where do you want to be, so we kind of focus on the future, because the point of coaching is for them to feel better and get some techniques and some tools they can have rest of their lives to actually be the best
mhm,
version of themselves, right? That's basically what coaching is. With therapy, is more like, it's not that we don't heal with past trauma and stuff, because things will come up, but it's like
mhm,
therapy is much more in the past. I feel like you kind of
mhm,
trying to heal some parts of you from the past, whereas coaching is very much where you're at right now, where do you want to be, and let's go there, how to get there. So I've
mhm,
been getting that question a lot recently, from my clients. They're like, what's the difference between you and, let's say, a neuropsychologist or something. So
right.
there is a huge difference in the way coaching is, because I always say to my clients, they have all the answers within themselves. I'm just helping them to get them, to the, like, in the light, right? And everybody can become spiritual, everybody can tune into themselves, but of course it takes time, and good things take time, right? If they don't know how to, that's where we come in. We help them, to
Mhm.
become that version of themselves, right? So
I love that. And honestly, Farah, what you said there is a very important point that I think is very important to highlight as well. Is, there is a difference between coaching and therapy, like you're saying, right? And as coaches, it does happen that we talk about stuff in the past as well, right? Like obviously that comes up in the
obviously
conversations
that comes
because,
up for all of us. Yeah, yeah, yeah,
right, absolutely.
yeah.
Independent. Sometimes we'll be talking about, and what I've noticed from my personal coaching as well, right? And this is why I think like spiritual coaching is awesome because again, we can go deeper, right? Like I want to understand the client and why they've got these specific limiting beliefs. But again, like I said, like one of my clients specifically works with me and a therapist at the same time, right? So
Oh
we
yeah,
work on
so do
two
my
different things.
clients.
So
They have their
exactly.
therapist as well. Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Right. So
yeah.
this is what I mean. And that's so important to know is that, it's you can work with both, right? Honestly, they work in tandem and we've
Yeah, it's
got
different
different
focus.
approaches. Exactly.
Yeah, so the
Different approaches.
focus
Yep.
shift. Yeah, the focus shifts, but it's not like we're just working on different. We're just doing it in different ways, and you have different outcomes, from it, but benefiting the person, obviously becoming a better version of themselves, and yeah, basically. And I think the beauty of spirituality is that, no matter what happens, because will always throw rocks at you, always.
Hmm.
But
Yep.
when you have that toolkit, as I call it, if you have that toolkit, you know how to tap into yourself, even though. So I have three kids, right? And when they like, they're all fighting and stuff, I know how to zoom into myself. I know which breathing exercises to do. And I think it was Christmas. We were talking and we were asking, how's it going? And I was like, there's like chaos around me. So I just did my breathing exercises. And you were like, oh, wow. And how are you feeling now? And I was like, I'm actually feeling better now because it actually works. Because, right?
Hmm.
I went and spent only 10 minutes for myself, getting my nerves down. And then I'm a better mother, right? So it's very important that, yeah, so coaching basically puts you first and you get a toolkit how to cope in difficult situations,
Absolutely.
basically. Yeah, yeah. And with the spirituality, again, it's the whole thing being connected. There's a higher calling no matter what. If you just release and trust, the universe got your back. That is something, it takes time for you to get there to understand if you're not spiritual. But no matter what happens, like, you're gonna be good, right?
Absolutely.
um
I could not agree more with that. 100%.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but people who are not spiritual, they ask me questions like, what do you mean? Like, I don't have enough, like, financial money for next month's rent or something. How can you
Hmm.
be like that? Or like, how has the universe got my back? It's like, okay, I'm not saying it literally. Like, of course, you have to put in some action if you're searching for a job. Like, of course, things will not come in your lap, right? You have to take action and be consistent, and then release and trust. It's not like things would pop in, for you. There's a difference, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think what you just highlighted there, Farah, is extremely important for people to understand. Is action is the most important thing you can do. It doesn't matter, like, how can I say this? You can have all the tools on your tool belt. You can read all the books, right? You can And I know a lot of people that, read a lot of books and such, but if you don't implement, right, what you're applying, knowledge is not power. Applied
Exactly.
knowledge is power. You need to take action. You need to apply these things, right? So again, even like visualization, manifestation, right? Like as an example, I'm a very big advocate for visualization. I do it a lot myself personally. It's something that has really changed my life. However, just sitting there and visualizing, but not actually taking action on your goal is not, in my personal opinion, is not going to do anything, right? You need to actually
No.
shift your mindset and say, okay, this is a important component, right? It helps you visualize, it helps you kind of get clear on what it is that you want, but then you need to take that action to actually get your goal started, right? You start with the first step, and you go from there, right? So taking action is 100%, I think, the most important thing we can do. Absolutely. Yeah.
Yes, and that is where coaching is very good, because then you have an accountable partner, and we all need that, right? We all
Yes.
need that because it's a new habit, and starting a new habit is always very difficult. So our brain does not like that. It does not like new stuff. It does not like to get out of the comfort zone, and you're
Right.
constantly out of your comfort zone in coaching. So it gets uncomfortable, but then when it's implemented and your brain, so neuroplasticity comes into my mind now. So you kind of
Hmm.
rewire your thoughts from talking, like if you have negative self-talk and you shift that, obviously it will take time for your brain to believe the new reality of you and your thoughts.
Yes.
And it's so important. So shifting thoughts, first of all, and that you can have a new reality. You don't have to be stuck in this situation. And it takes time, right? And like nothing good happens overnight. And Rome was not built on a day. So it's
Absolutely.
also like investing and being patient with yourself and with your coach when you're committing to something, because it does take time, and it takes time for your body and your mind to work together also to believe the new reality, which is self-love, which is prioritizing yourself and tapping into yourself and go on that spiritual journey, and it does take
Mhm.
time. And yeah, so as you said, you can read a book, but it doesn't mean you understood it. You can take a master degree, but does not mean that you know how to, like, it does not mean you're clever. I say that to people a lot. Just because you have multiple degrees does not mean that you're intelligent. What does it mean, right? You have to implement it. You have to put in the work and the knowledge and then get it out, because otherwise, what does it mean, right?
Absolutely. 100%. Yep.
It's like reading the back of the cover of the book. I feel like if you're not like doing, no, but
I
basically
love
if
that.
you,
Yep.
yeah, yeah. So now we have a topic for new reels, but it's like you're doing that, but you haven't read the whole book. Maybe you have, but you haven't like understood it. And that's the thing. You have not understood it. And of course, then if you haven't done that, how can you implement it? And how can you
Mhm.
use it? How can you change your reality? So yeah, I think basically that was what I had. Any final notes, Nick, on spirituality and mental health and how spirituality? Okay, we didn't talk about that, but I think we did in between the lines. So mental health related to spirituality. Do you think there's distinction there? Something important to mention?
I
The
think it's
relation between spirituality and mental health, emotional well-being.
absolutely. Yeah, that's a great question, Farah. And I would say absolutely, right? It's again, to me, spirituality is about really going in and making those changes in your life that you want to see, right? So it's about really assessing, okay, like again, you can do this assessment on yourself. Where are you right now and where you want to go, right? Because like for me personally, right, I lived my life on autopilot for so many years that it was really just directing my life, right? And there's a great quote by Carl Jung, right, who's a great psychologist, and he says, "Until you
Mhm.
make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate." Right. So to me, this is where spirituality and mental health bridge together. Honestly, right? It's
Yes.
because the everything that you do spiritually, quote unquote, is what's going to help your mental health, right? So what I mean by that is the spiritual practices that you have, right? So like we talked about meditation, yoga, it could be so many things. Personally, for me, spiritual practices are anything that makes you feel good. So journaling,
Yeah, it could
reading,
be
going to
dancing,
the gym,
it could be painting,
dancing.
right? It could be anything that
Absolutely.
makes you happy. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah.
Absolutely. And this is another clear distinction I want to make again, because I find that like the word spirituality has it's shifted a bit. I find, in my personal opinion, and I feel like some people have a clear set on what it is. Like they think like spirituality is only meditation or mindfulness, for example, right? But it's all of those things. It's whatever makes you
Yes.
feel good, right? It's yoga. Like
Yes.
when you're doing yoga, you're absolutely present in the moment. You're connected with
Oh
the
my God, I
mind,
love
body,
yoga.
right?
Yeah.
Right. So
Yeah.
yoga is a great way for me. That's the gym personally, right? Like when I'm in the zone, I'm at the gym. That is
My
my
soul is at peace when I do yoga. And every time I do it, I'm like, why didn't I do it more? Like, why don't I do it more often? Because it feels
absolutely.
so awesome. I'm like stretched out and I feel great. Like,
Absolutely. So this is what I mean by incorporating more of those quote unquote spiritual practices. It can only benefit your mental health, right? And again, this goes with a
yeah,
lot of different work. Obviously, you like these are things that can help you, but again, when you're working with a coach or therapist, right, they will help you as well with their own things. Perhaps it's journaling, perhaps it's just the one-on-one conversations helping you guide you in the right direction. But then,
absolutely.
you've also got those things that help you and ground you, right? Like for me personally, like I said, like I'm a big advocate for mindfulness. I meditate. The gym is my big thing, and in the past few years, reading for me has been my personal thing. And
Oh, yeah,
I
you read a lot.
I love reading, right? And it's like I
I
said,
love
it
reading
changed my
too.
life, and I know you do as well, right? So reading is so
Mhm.
powerful, and to
Not as
me,
much as
reading is
you, but I have children. So,
that is an absolutely fair point. And to me, like reading is almost a form of meditation, right? Because again, when I'm reading and like my mind wanders, I bring it back to the present
yeah.
and what I'm doing, right? So it's
Yes.
almost like it trains me in a way, and it helps me stay present, right? So I don't know. For me, that this is what I mean by bridging spirituality and mental health. I think they're one and the same, right? And the practices that you do that help you or that benefit you to improve that
Mhm.
mental health, that's what's
Mhm.
most important in it all, right? So that would be my perspective on that. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So, Nick, where can people find you? You did put your Instagram name. So, if people want to work with you, where can they find you?
Yeah, absolutely. So Instagram is a great place to message me there. You can contact me there. And right now, actually, I'm almost launching my website, so I'll have that very soon. I've got a landing page right now, but I will have my
That's
website up and
awesome.
running. Thank you. And then yeah, so Instagram is a great place to find me, and also the podcast as well. If you guys want to tune in, listen to that. I provide a lot of information there for people who are interested in mindset, spirituality, like we talked about, and just personal
Mhm.
growth, personal self development
Yeah.
in general, right? So I consider it kind of a quote unquote self help podcast, right? So that's really
Yes,
what it's
it
labeled
is. I,
as,
I would call it that.
um,
It is. Yeah. And
right?
you have short
And
episodes. It's very easy to get through on the go. And yeah. So I think people should definitely tune into your podcast, A Mindful Perspective by Nick Levesque. Levesque?
yes, that's
By
exactly, yeah,
Nick
that's perfect,
Levesque.
Farah. Yeah, it's good.
I feel so nervous saying it. And people always feel nervous saying my name is the opposite today. So yeah. And you're located in Canada, but you're an online coach, right? Or do you take physical people in as well? Or
It would be both, to be quite honest. Yes, like, and the reason I'm on Instagram and I guess the internet platforms, if you will, is because I would love to work with anyone. It doesn't matter where you're
yeah.
located, but yeah, absolutely.
It's the same with me, but now I'm doing in-person sessions as well, which is cool. Now that I have Danes following me, I had so many Canadians and Americans following me for a while, so it's so funny. Yeah, so it's an international coaching because we want to help as many people as possible, and
Hmm.
yeah. So who would you say is your potential client to work with? So people kind of like, is it yeah? Who is it? Is it like the people who work 9 to 5, or who is it? Is it like a specific target audience that you work with usually, or yeah? Can you just elaborate that before we end our podcast?
Absolutely. So for me, I've got kind of like two ideal avatars, if that's what you're asking for in terms of
Yeah,
clients. So like for me, yeah,
yeah.
personally is first and foremost, I love to work with people who were in my shoes once upon a time, right? Like,
Mhm.
so for example, really, like if I look at myself, for example, 7, 8 years ago, where I was absolutely stuck, I felt like, my life had no meaning. I was completely stuck in my head. I was a prisoner of my own mind, right? And,
Oh
and
yeah,
again, right. So, and I think a lot of us have been there, but it's like I've said many times, the mind is a wonderful servant, but a terrible master, right? So for me,
oh
that's
yeah.
really what I like to work with people who, again, they're stuck. They don't know how to get out. They're feeling lost. They're feeling really, again, I like the word stuck because I think a lot of
I
us
think
can
many
relate to
people
that
feel
word,
stuck. I
right?
use the
So
word trapped in life, but yeah, same thing.
absolutely
Trapped
trapped in life,
trapped
right?
by themselves often in the mind, as you said, prisoner of their own mind. Yeah.
Absolutely. And like from the clients I've worked with, and the reason like I like to work with these people, right, is like when we talk, when we sit down, uh, what I like to offer as well is like, understanding how they're feeling, right, how to process those emotions. And, a lot of people have trouble really sitting with themselves and
Mhm.
processing what they're feeling, right? To sit with
Oh,
how it
yeah.
feels, because feeling is hard, right? Feeling can be very hard. So for me, it's helping people with that. And I've worked with, for example, very successful entrepreneurs that, even though they quote unquote have it all, they're still feeling like they're missing something.
Of
This is what
course.
I mean when even though they're extremely quote unquote successful on paper, they're still having so many issues in their lives, right? So I've worked from people with that, or just people who, again, very similar to me a few years ago, where they're just absolutely stuck and they don't know how to get out. And so those would be the people I love to work with. Right?
That's beautiful, Nick. I think you're doing a beautiful job helping so many people, and I
Thank you.
love your page. So I would definitely recommend everybody to go and follow Nick, and also follow me if you're not following me. So
Absolutely. Please follow Farah.
yeah,
Yeah.
this podcast will be streamed to YouTube, my YouTube channel, which is finally launched, and on Spotify and Apple, you can find the podcast. Thank you so much, Nick, for coming in today. I really appreciate it, and I think it was a um, yeah, beautiful episode about spirituality and you sharing your story with people. I think many can resonate with that. So thank you so much for coming over.
I appreciate it, Farah. And thank you so much for having me. It was a pleasure. And I look forward to doing this again sometime. Absolutely.
Yeah, I would love to. Bye. It's not ending the recording, so I will crop that out.